Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Grana, and I am a program manager for This Is My Brave. Welcome to episode 12, season 1 of BraveTV. We'd first like to thank the Alkermes Inspiration Grant COVID-19 Relief Fund for sponsoring this season as we continue to explore how COVID-19 and current affairs are impacting our mental health. Our September episodes of BraveTV are dedicated to it being National Suicide Prevention Month. We do believe at This Is My Brave that Suicide Prevention Day is every day, but we do need to put out all the information that we can while the topic is magnified throughout the country. Today's episode is focused on our alumni, and the topic is surviving suicide, stories from our Brave alumni. I'm incredibly grateful to our guests, Danielle Fiorello, Joe Sorensen, and Chris Walters for joining us to talk about this difficult topic. Their stories are real firsthand experiences with suicide, and their bravery to share their stories is nothing short of inspiring. So we will go ahead and get started. So let's start with Danielle. Do you want to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure. I'm Danielle Fiorello, and I currently am living in Somerset, New Jersey. And I was in the 2015 New York City Brave show. I heard about This Is My Brave through, I was on Facebook, I think, just scrolling through, and an ad came up and it said something along the lines of like, do you have mental illness and, sing or write poetry or, some type of art form, come and audition for our show. And I thought, well, I'm definitely mentally ill and I write songs. So I'm thinking I'd be probably, acceptable for this kind of show. And I wasn't gonna do it, to be honest. My anxiety just like took over, and I've been performing. I've performed my whole life, and then I stopped for like 10 years. I stopped singing. I'll share a little bit of why in a little bit, but I really made it to the show because my partner that I was married to at the time, which I am not anymore, I've been divorced since this year or last year. But I had mentioned it to her and she was like, oh, this would be perfect. Like, you need to do this. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I really just don't think I can. I was like, I just can't. Like, my anxiety is it's just too much. It'll be too much. Well, she decided that she was going to fill out the application and she got me an appointment for the audition. And I was like, oh man, I was like, all right, well, she did all that. So like, I guess I should go. And I did, and I went into the city and I met Lauren, and who was the producer for that show, Lauren Jaffe, and Rachel. I think Rachel. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now. But anyway, two very, very, very sweet people. And I had written a song just very recently to that, and I thought, well, I think this is probably a pretty good song to do. It's called "Look in the Mirror," and so I sang it. And what was so funny to me was that the audition was held in one of New York City's rehearsal studios, and on the one wall, the whole entire wall was a mirror, and I had to like see myself auditioning. And I was like, oh my God. And let me tell you, like, the anxiety I was experiencing that day was incredible. I was soaked. My shirt was everything was soaked, my underwear, everything. But I did it and I got through it, and like, they just stood up and they like started clapping. And then like Lauren was just like, can I give you a hug? And I was like, yeah, I think I could really use that right now because I'm freaking shaking. And he walked over and he just gave me like the warmest hug. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I felt proud of myself because I did it. You know, I got through it. So anyway, you know, it comes to the show, and I also had a lot of issues with getting on the train by myself and getting into the city, and you know, going for a couple of rehearsals that we had, and you know, meeting the other cast members and things like that. But I at that point I was ready to work through the anxiety, like, and not let it stop me, you know, because like, I got into the show. So then I was like, okay, well, I have to go in now and do these things. And then the day of the show, oh man, it was like the worst day ever, honestly. And I almost ran off the stage and didn't do my performance, like right up to the minute that I was supposed to go on. The woman sitting next to me, Kathleen Frazier, she literally was holding onto my arm, and she was like, no, you can't leave, you know. And I was like, I can't do this, I can't do it, you know. And she just held onto me. And so it came my turn, and I went up and I did my thing. And I have to say, like, and if you do watch my video, you will see at the very beginning of the video, I say, you know, before it started, I think I should bring up the fact that I'm having an extreme anxiety attack right now. Like, I mean, seriously, my ears were ringing, my teeth were numb, my heart was pounding out of my chest, and I did almost just run off of the stage like a minute prior. So I did my performance. I was still very, very nervous. My voice was shaking all over the place, but I got through it. And one of the things I had said about that was that, you know, I feel like being here, you know, like that's kind of the point right now, is like, even through all of these feelings, is like to do it anyway, right? And I think that's like how you build strength. Like each time you push through those types of feelings where you really literally feel like sometimes you're going to pass out, it turns out that each time you do that, you just gain a little extra bar of strength and a little extra bar of, like, you know, life. What This Is My Brave did for me, it saved my soul, literally. I was like, if I can get through that, you know, like, and if I could do that, if I could work through all of that and get through that, like, and make it to the end of that, like, I think I could do pretty much anything. I was feeling really proud of myself, which I had a really hard time doing, was ever being proud of myself. One of the reasons that I always wanted to kill myself was because I hated me. I had done so many things to hurt so many people through my addiction and my mental illness, that I just was like, you're awful and you don't deserve to be here, and there's no purpose for you, and the world would literally be better off without you. That was my true, honest belief. And I This Is My Brave, it's in my life every day. And there's days even where sometimes I will go watch my video because I need that reminder, like, Danielle, look what you did, you know, like. And recently I've had some of the most amazing growth, which is that right now I'm going, sorry, I might cry. I'm going through such a hard time right now with a certain situation in my life, and of course going through the pandemic makes it like 10 times worse, because I don't have that music for that, you know, that music outlet that I was having. Because all of a sudden it just came to a halt, you know. And I think that my tears are more of gratitude, because for like one of the first times in my life, through this incredible pain that I'm feeling inside, I've not once thought about going to hurt myself or kill myself. And it's like, if I can get to that place, I think that anybody can. That's really my message. And I know what's helped me, and it's just not ever giving up. And it's has always been reaching out for help. And one of the biggest helps is people listening to you, like actively listening, not trying to offer any kind of solution, not trying to give you advice of what you should be doing to make yourself feel better, not any of that, just sitting there and listening to your pain and holding it in their hands and saying, I got you. And sometimes just saying it's all going to be okay. This is just a moment in time. This won't last forever. And that's really what has helped me the most. That's what I needed. But it was up to me, yes, sometimes to, of course, to reach out and say, this is how I'm feeling. I've always not had a problem with calling suicide prevention hotlines or texting with them. I still have a counselor. I meet with her through BetterHelp app online. We have video sessions once a week. I have a support system. And I have a toolbox. I basically had to have a shed, like, of tools, like, because the toolbox just wasn't big enough for this girl. So I'm just really, more than anything today in my life, I'm just so freaking grateful. I'm so grateful to This Is My Brave, for sure. I've cried to Jennifer so many times. Every time I talk to her, I cry because I just feel so grateful. And I'm just grateful that now my number one thought and my number one solution isn't, well, let's go kill ourselves because I can't take this anymore. Now I go to, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, what's next for you, Danielle? And so to be able to say that is so amazing to me. Sometimes I don't know how I got there. But I do, and it was a lot of hard work. It was, but I can tell you it's worth it. So do the hard work and it will all be okay. And I know that I can sit here and say that I'm living proof of that. Anybody can. So just love yourselves.
Oh, Danielle, your story is so special and you're so strong. And I'm so happy that you're here. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I will tell you that I first saw your performance. Jen and I were at a coffee shop in Bentonville, Arkansas, and she said, I need you to watch this. And I said, am I going to cry? And she said, you might, but it's okay because you need to feel your feelings. And we were sitting at the bar in the coffee shop and I bawled my eyes out because I had said this before, and some people in This Is My Brave know, but I found This Is My Brave because of losing one of my best friends, Jason, to suicide in June of 2018. So whenever I hear stories of surviving, I mean, really all of the stories impact me in different ways. And I also live with mental illness. So, it's compounded. So your story is beautiful and I'm so glad you're here. And you touched on so many points that are incredibly important. So I want to go over to Joe now. And Joe, can you tell us a little bit about where you're calling in from and, your participation in This Is My Brave and what that's been like for you?
Sure. So my name is Joe Sorensen, and I am located in Des Moines, Iowa. And I was in This Is My Brave, I think 4 times. We did it quite a few times in the Iowa City area, and then I actually went down to Kansas City once to be in it. I'm a very musical person, and I enjoyed getting to do music. The first time, I don't remember what year. I'm not great with dates. I'm not a good history person. But I did a song called King for a Day. And King for a Day was about the first time that I went into the hospital for suicidal thinking. And it was it's a very autobiographical song about just some of the people that I met in there. Specifically, there was this man named Thomas that I met in there. And I'll give you a very brief version. If you want to hear the full story, you can go watch the video. But a man named Thomas who was suffering from his own mental illness. And he told me one day, he said, if you could be king for a day, what would you do? All power and control would be up to you. And he gave me that on a piece of paper, and I wrote on it something along the lines of, I would make sure that everyone was loved and that they didn't hurt anymore. And I gave it to him, and he gave it back to me. And I said, oh, I want you to have this. And he said, no, I want you to have this. So I've kind of kept that piece of paper, and I wrote a song based on that. Sorry, my grandfather clock is now going off, so you can probably hear that in the background. Yeah, so that was the first time I did that song. The next time I did a song called Death and All Her Pretty Little Monsters, which I actually wrote when I was in high school, just about dealing with depression and dealing with suicidal thinking. It's no secret to most of the people in my life that suicidal thinking is something that I deal with on a monthly, weekly, often daily basis. It's something that I have learned a lot about over time and that I've hopefully educate some other people on. I was telling someone the other day that for me, often suicidal thinking is a knee-jerk reaction, that when a situation gets really tense and stressful, that is instantly where my brain goes. Just like some people go to, I need to go for a run or I need to go for a jog or something, my brain goes straight to, I need to end my life. And so Death and All Her Pretty Little Monsters is a little bit about that and working through that. And it has this big part at the end where people sing together and it's around. And I loved when I played it, I had never played it with an audience before where I had people singing the different parts. And it worked out really cool. I was super excited for how it works. So if you're interested, go and watch that video. But I guess just if you can take away a story from that or a lesson from that, it's that there are people for whom suicidal thinking is like a knee-jerk everyday reaction that they have to learn how to live with, and they have to learn how to just stop those thoughts and how to address them. And so for a lot of people, it's not just like a one and done sort of thing. For some people it is, which is fantastic. Like if you can get through at a point and it's just not something you think about anymore, I think that's beautiful and that's amazing. For other people, it's something to think about daily. The third time that I was in the show, I did a song called It Gets Better, which is kind of like there's the different scopes. So one song was about you're in the hospital because you've had this really intensive situation. Another song was about the continual thinking that you have going on. And then It Gets Better is literally what the song, what the title says is that it can get better. And even if you live with these continual thoughts, things can improve. So that's kind of been my experience with it. And it's really been cathartic for me. I've met a lot of great people. Just the other stories that I've heard, the friends that I've made from This Is My Brave. It's really, really amazing. If you ever want to check it out. So the second time I did This Is My Brave, I actually made a CD that was full of all of these like hopeful songs, because I write a lot of music and a lot of them happen to be about mental health. And it's called Violets and Bones, because we all have bones deep inside of us, no matter what else we have going on, whether it's mental illness or financial instability or developmental disabilities or wealth or whatever it is, we all have bones, and bones make us the same. So there's a part of the title comes from. The other one is about violets and seeing the beauty in everyday life. But anyways, that album is now up on like Spotify and all that stuff. So you didn't have to be at the show anymore. Now you can just be anybody who wants to hear, King for a Day or Death and All Her Pretty Little Monsters or It Gets Better. They're all online, and I hope they make people feel a little bit better. That's what music does for me. When I'm not doing well, music is my number one coping skill. So I hope they can help somebody else out.
Yeah, Joe, I love watching your performances. I love your music, and I got chills the first time I watched the one where you had the audience sing with you. I was like, this is incredible. I'm so glad people are participating, because you really don't ever know what's going to happen with a live crowd. But it's so good. And we will be linking all of your music and everyone's videos from the shows below in the chat box, so your performances can be viewed by our viewers. But yeah, thank you so much for a little bit of background about yourself and for being here. And I'm going to go over to Chris, and then we'll come back for some group topics in just a minute. So Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. My name's Chris Walters. I'm from out of Cortland, Illinois. The way I found out about This Is My Brave was actually from my counselor, who just had a flyer for the tryouts, and he felt that I was very open with my story and very understanding with my story, and he thought, you know, me being so open about it would be helpful to other people. So after I did the tryouts and luckily it was in the town I was living in. I didn't have to go anywhere to do anything. It was literally a couple blocks away from my house at the time. I was fortunate enough to get chosen, and we did all the rehearsals and did the show, and it was more or less for me to get myself stepping out of my comfort zone and to do something I really, really didn't want to do, because that's usually pretty helpful for me. It's doing something I really don't want to do will get me out of my depressive state. So and that's basically my story about how I found This Is My Brave.
That's great. And I told Chris this before, but his was the first show that I ever saw live before, or right when I found out about This Is My Brave. I traveled over to DeKalb to see their show. And Chris, I will never forget when you told your story, and I sat there with my jaw like in my lap, because I was like, this is so new and raw for you. I mean, you were within a year of your attempt, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I just couldn't, and the changes that you had already implemented in your life and being up on stage and telling your story was just amazing, just amazing. And I think that sometimes it is helpful with This Is My Brave when we have people in varying spaces of recovery, that to show our viewers that it's possible at different times. I mean, each of you bring to the table different phases of recovery here, and it's really important. So I was so impressed, and then of course I fell in love with This Is My Brave after I saw your show live, and I found out it was like real and a real organization. So but there are a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. So one thing that I've been focusing on this month of it being National Suicide Prevention Month is language around suicide. And I posted something on my Facebook a couple of days ago, and I said, I am cringing at all of the news outlets and everyone that is using the phrase committed suicide or commit suicide. And I put, 3 reminders of how language matters, of you want to say died by suicide or attempted suicide instead of a failed suicide. And we live with mental illness. We don't suffer from mental illness, or I am not depression or something. So I did get some feedback on people asking why that's important, why that makes such a difference. Does anyone have any experience with that, where maybe you've taught someone that, or you do understand the power of language? Joe, do you have something?
I do, actually. So one, I want to give a shout out to the friend that I'm about to reference, because he actually holds onto my meds for me when I start feeling really sick, because I always think about overdosing. So he gives me just enough meds to get me through. So I want to give him a shout out for that, because the rest of the story is he had a friend who was close to him who died by suicide, and we were talking about it, and he kept using the phrase committed suicide. And I wanted to be really sensitive to the fact that it was his friend who had passed away, and correcting someone often doesn't come across the right way. So I just said, hey, have you ever heard of the phrase died by suicide? And he said, no. And then I explained that committed often sounds like a crime. And we had just been talking about how unfortunate it was that his friend had battled depression for so long, and that his death ended up being by suicide. So I was just telling him, do you view your friend's battle with depression as a crime? And he said, no, it was something that I wish that he didn't have to deal with, and that was excruciating for him. And I said, then one way that we can reframe some of the language is, rather than saying committed suicide, we can say that they died from something. And he was like, I could just see that it was a complete mental shift for him, and he really appreciated that. So I guess anybody else who is out there, just think of it that way, that, suffering from depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or any sort of a mental illness, it's not a crime. And so if someone ends up dying as a result of suicide from that, they didn't commit a crime. It was a way that they had died. So yeah, that's just the time that I talked to a friend about it, and it was a really good conversation, and I don't know, it's always amazing. People want to learn as long as you come at them with grace. If you attack somebody and you say, like, you can't say that, people tend to put up walls. But if we all try to be a little more patient and gracious with each other, and teach each other out of love, then you're more likely to make those connections.
Absolutely. That was a perfect example of the language language mattering. I think that oftentimes it's easy to, or it's difficult for us, I should say, to change the language that we grew up with. And that's the language that surrounded us growing up and was there for so long. And I think also, right, you have not only do you want to think of someone having committed a crime, but also then you say the word commit and it has the bad stigma. Suicide is already a big, bad stigma-inducing word. And people are scared to say it or scared to acknowledge it, whether you're the one suffering from suicidal ideation or an attempt, or if you're talking about someone else. So I think giving life to these words and putting the human faces on them, which is what This Is My Brave does and exactly what you guys represent, is just so important. So Chris or Danielle, have either of you had experiences with that, or even, after your attempt where language affected you or it felt stigmatized?
Yeah, I can talk about actually how I was Joe's friend, that needed to change my language, because like what you just said, I was brought up with the term committed suicide. I heard it all the time. And so, I was just repeating it and not thinking about at all, what that word really was referring to. And it was actually after I got involved with This Is My Brave, after I did my show, and I really started following different, mental health organizations that I started to learn. And I was then made aware of the different language that we should be using and why. So I needed to have that shift, and it has actually made me feel a lot better, about what happened, in my situation, that I wasn't a bad person, for doing that, that I shouldn't, feel guilty, that I was just in a lot of pain and I wanted it to go away and I didn't like myself. And that was it, period, end of story. It didn't make me bad, So, because, not for me, no one ever, people around me were always pretty supportive. I never had anything like directly at me, but it doesn't mean that I didn't witness other people, people who would confide in me, that I would meet, and we would talk about, mental health stuff, and, and they would share stories with me of things that people had said to them, about how could you do that to your family, and how could you leave your mom, and, what about this person and that, and and it was like this guilt being put upon them, that they felt like, oh my gosh, like I wasn't doing it to hurt anybody. Like it wasn't purposely, it was just that I was really in a lot of pain and I was suffering. And that's the only way I saw out of that. And I needed help. So yes, I have learned a lot, a very lot, definitely about all of that. And now my language has changed dramatically about speaking about mental health issues, not even just, around the topic of suicide, but like all of the mental health topics that are out there. Now I'm very, very conscious about the words I'm using. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's why it's so important. Just opening up people's eyes and in our own eyes. Like, I mean, I didn't learn this overnight. I still have to like remind myself to say certain things or not assume certain things about someone. And it really makes me check myself before I say something. Chris, have you had any experiences with the stigma part of it or the language?
Not the language, perhaps, but more or less, I've dealt with a lot of mental health stigma, and that it's not real, or that it's just you being weak, and that kind of stuff. Being in the type of industry that I'm in, so that's definitely been something I've dealt with a lot of. But not much the wording. It's something I'm still learning. So
yeah, it's and I mean, Joe and Chris, you alone. I mean, part of the reason I didn't even want to go into statistics today about suicide is there's a million of them. Joe and Chris, you are men, so you are less likely to express your emotions, and the higher likelihood to die by suicide. And it's like, we know all of these things. But you hear them and you can say them, but it's not until you have the faces here telling the stories and having the conversations that, Chris, if you were out on, I don't actually know what you do for work, but I can only assume that like, if you were out at your job site or in your office or whatever it is, like, knowing you and how you've told your story and everything, you're not afraid to talk about it, but there are people that are really afraid to listen is the thing, because they worry about how that's going to impact them, and how they're going to have to express an emotion about it. Joe, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. So when you said people are afraid to talk about it, it made me think about people being afraid to talk about suicide in general. And people being afraid to bring it up. And it made me think about, there was a speaker that I heard once, I cannot remember his name. He's relatively famous. He survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. He has a video.
Chris Hines.
Yes, Chris Hines. So I got to hear Chris Hines speak, and he talked about suicidal intensity and using that as language, and how we can talk about the different levels of intensity that someone is feeling, whether it's just a slight thought that can pass through someone's mind, like I'd rather not be here, or if they're actually like coming up with a plan, and if they have a means to it, and if they are intending to act on that, and how those are all different levels of suicidal intensity. And so if someone tells you that they are suicidal, that doesn't necessarily mean like you need to freak out or mean that you can't talk about it with them. It's actually a lot better if you can talk with them about it and maybe try to unravel some of that. And I also don't necessarily get it over your head, like refer them to a counselor, refer them to like a mobile crisis person, but just knowing that like it's okay to talk with somebody, because it might be just a passing thought. Like they might not have a means, they might not have an intent, they might not have a plan. And when they do, that's when it can start to get more serious, and you start looking at like, we need to bring mobile crisis out, or we need to go to the hospital. So just framing language of like the suicidal intensity, so that, like you said, people are afraid to talk about it right now. So if they're not afraid to talk about it, hopefully we can start to bring it a little more into the light, because you can't unravel a knotted up string in the dark. You can only unravel that in the light. So like, you can't fix problems in the dark. You have to bring them into the light.
That's perfect. And you actually went straight into what I was going to ask next. And you said it perfectly, because I actually had being in the advocacy world, people will come to me and ask me, how do I talk to someone about that I think might be suicidal or want to hurt themselves. And I make the same statement that I'm not a medical professional and I'm not, they need professional help. But my first thing is don't be scared, because also that makes it about you when you're scared. So ask them what's going on and listen non-judgmentally. And I think that we've made headway in breaking the stigma about mental illness in terms of, I can openly say I live with post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety and depression, and I don't feel ashamed about that. But when I'm in my low point that I don't want to wake up tomorrow, that's where the judgment comes in if I reach out to someone, where all of a sudden it goes into fear and freak out. And it's like, I just need to say it. I just need to say it and get it out of my system. But also I'm just what you said about the suicidal intensity. I'm very low in terms of it. I've never had an attempt. I've never done anything like that. So you do have to be careful with people. But so were there any, I'm sorry, I just went on a total tangent, but are there any other things that you think that people need to know about addressing suicide, whether it's someone close to you or just advice for people to keep in the back of their minds? What would have helped you? What has helped you? Or just, what are those points that those little nuggets that people can walk away and be like, I'm going to remember this. So next time I'm in this situation, because everyone's going to be in this situation at some point, that if you actually ask someone how they're doing, they might not be okay. So does anyone have any additional, or, Joe, of course you can expand on yours, but anything to those points?
For me, it's always been, if I can survive this 10 seconds, I can survive the next 10 seconds, I can survive the next 10 seconds. And once it gets to a minute or 30 seconds, just keep thinking of it in the short term and not a year or a week or a month or a day. It's just about 10 seconds at a time.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Danielle, what about you?
So, for me personally, I would like to start by saying that, for me, when I say the words, my thoughts are, usually I'll say my thoughts are going to bad places. Mm-hmm. And then if someone doesn't get that, or if they ask me to elaborate, then I'll say, I'm having thoughts, of hurting myself and not wanting to be here, and I'm having thoughts of dying, of wanting to die. I feel what happens for me personally in that moment is that it takes the power away, immensely. I say it and it's like, oh, that's not really what you want though. That's where you're at right now, and that's a feeling you're having. And someone once said to me in a rehab that I was in, feelings aren't facts necessarily, and feelings are always changing, from even sometimes from minute to minute. But the other thing that honestly has really helped me is because sometimes you really don't feel safe. I haven't always felt, when I say safe, meaning maybe comfortable with going to somebody that I know, personally, or like a family member, because of what you said, because they freak out and they get all worried, especially a mom, you know what I mean? If I say that stuff to my mom, she's like, oh my God, my daughter, because she had to see me literally laying in a bed, on life support. And so calling a hotline has been very helpful for me, because that person doesn't know me and I don't know them. We don't have, any kind of, bond or relationship. They're just an outside person that is literally there just listening to me and letting me let that out, and then letting the power of it be taken away. And they know, you know, they are trained to ask specific questions, you know, to see what level it's at. And, you know, and if they do need to recommend, you know, that you go to like your nearest emergency room, or, you know, or if they don't feel that it's at that level, you know, like they're able to gauge things. And that's really helpful, because sometimes, you know, when I'm in that state of mind, like I don't even really know, you know, like, because I'm just, you know, my thoughts are everywhere and my feelings are very intense. Yes, even texting, you know, sometimes I haven't even been able to like call, you know, because sometimes I cry so hard that I just can't speak. So texting, you know, a suicide prevention hotline and speaking with a counselor on there through text is has helped me a lot too, for real. So yeah, being listened to and just getting it out is awesome, and it gets me through and every time I've done that, I really am always amazed at how I feel after that little session is done. I'm like, I feel so much lighter, and I'm like, oh, I'm not even in that place anymore in my head, honestly. Like I just feel like, okay, it's gonna be all right. Like you got through that, you know, because you had someone there, and now you're all right. So let's take a rest, you know, do some self-care, and then we'll move on with things.
Yeah, it's so important. And the resources that are available now are really powerful and incredible, like crisis text line, and they assess your risk level right away when you text them. And so you might have to wait a couple minutes if you're a lower risk, but they get you within like 5 minutes connected to someone. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, all of these will be listed as resources because they're great. And I know that sometimes calling a hotline can seem really daunting at first, but Danielle, you just described it perfectly, of having someone unbiased and someone that has your full attention. And then you can kind of step away also from it, and you might feel really, you know, raw or vulnerable, but you made that decision to help yourself, and you get to walk away with that power that you made that call, and that's a win always. So yeah, I think you guys, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I've been like nervous about it all day, just because it's such a heavy topic, and I was like, am I gonna cry? Like, are we all gonna cry? I don't know. So thank you. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to add as you know, something you didn't get to say earlier, last piece of advice, anything?
I just wanted to say to Chris and Joe, you know, that I just appreciate, you know, their presence in this world so very much. I waited until today to watch their videos, you know, so it would be fresh, you know, in my mind and in my heart. And I was very moved. Joe, I sang along with your song. I was adding harmonies. I was like dancing on my bed, and like, it was great. I was clapping. And, you know, Chris, I freaking stopped through your whole video, and I was just like holding my chest, and I was just like, oh man, it was like I felt like every word of that could have been mine, you know. And I just I really appreciate you, both of you, so much, and I'm so glad that I, through this, have gotten the opportunity, you know, to have some kind of connection with you now. And, you know, really and I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to Katie for you know, hosting this and doing this. And I think that you did a really, really awesome job.
Thank you. And maybe you and Joe need to collab one day.
Oh my God, I was thinking that when I was watching. I was like, oh, musician collab.
Right?
My favorite thing is to collaborate with other people.
I love that. Chris, what were you gonna say?
Just thanks for the opportunity to speak today, and just hopefully any one of our advice can help somebody.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Joe?
Yeah, just thank you for having me. Thank you for having us and letting us speak. And I guess just to anyone who's watching, keep going. It gets really hard sometimes, but keep going and check in on each other and take care of each other. If it seems like someone is having a rough day, if you've got the strength inside of you, try not to ignore it. If you don't have the strength inside of you, maybe try to point them to someone who does, because you can't fill up someone else's bucket if your bucket is empty, but you can still point them towards somebody else who has a bucket whose bucket is full. That's something that my mother always tells me. So I feel like moms have good wisdom. I should repeat something like that. Yeah, but thanks for having us, and everybody just keep going. I know it's a tough time.
Yeah. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here and for actually like physically being here. Like I'm so thankful that you guys are on this earth and that you've shared your stories with This Is My Brave. It's incredible. I do want to remind our viewers that if anyone is struggling, just as Joe said, or if you know someone that's struggling at this time, reach out for help. We'll have several resources listed below the video in the chat. And thanks again for joining us today. We will be taking the month of October off from BraveTV so that we can premiere all of our virtual shows. So join us for those. We'll be in Houston, St. Louis, Hampton Roads, Virginia, DC for a teen show, which will be really awesome. And New Hampshire. Did I say that already? I'm sorry if I missed one of our shows. Anyway, join us in October. The full schedule will be on the website and you can register there for free. So thank you everybody and have a great day.